there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making a bandsaw box. Now, bandsaw boxes are a fun project that really have no limits as far as their shape and size. You can make it in whatever configuration you want. However, there are things that you need to consider. And that's where we're going to start with the stock. Now for me, I want to laminate some stock together, so I'm going to be making the core of the box out of poplar, and I'm going to be making the outer edges with walnut. Now for me, I don't want to get any bigger than what my spindle sander will sand, which is about 3 3/4 inches. So for my purposes though, I'm going to have the center core being 2-inch thick poplar, and I'm going to laminate 3/4 of walnut on the front and the back. That'll give us a total of about 3.5 inches. You know, give or take a little bit. In other words, my spindle sander will be able to handle sanding the pieces without any problem. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get out that thickness planer, we're going to get out the bandsaw, install a resaw blade in it, we're going to plane our poplar to 2 inches thick, and I'm going to do some resaw on the walnut and then plane it down to 3/4 inch. So now that we have our stock milled, what I've done is I've cut it to a length of 7 inches. The width is just under 6. And now the next step is to laminate our pieces of walnut to our piece of poplar so that we get a block of wood that is something like this, which should equal about 3.5 inches thick. And it's exactly 3.5 inches thick. So we're going to glue this up, put plenty of clamps on it, and give it time for the glue to set up. Well, the first thing that you want to do as soon as your glue up is dry enough to use is you want to flatten out the bottom edge of your glue up. Now, there's several ways you could do it. You could do it on the table saw. Depending on the thickness though, you may have to make one pass and then turn your piece over and make a second pass to clean this up. You could also use a hand plane, or in my case, I actually used my jointer. So the jointer was able to clean it up really nicely and give me perfectly 90 degrees between my sides and my bottom. Well, now that you have that leveled out and everything looks good on the bottom half, we need to head over to the bandsaw now. The very first thing that we want to do here, at least for me anyway, is we need to cut the back of our bandsaw box off. So it doesn't matter which side you choose as the back. Both could be the back, but we still have our resaw blade in. So we're going to set our fence at approximately 1/4 inch. Some people do 3/8, some do less, some do more, whatever you want. I only eyeballed this at potentially 1/4 inch there, and we're just going to make the cut and cut the back off of our box. So now take the piece that you just cut off, and that will be our back. We're going to put that aside. Now what I've done is I've taken a piece of paper that is roughly the same size as this, and I've applied spray adhesive to it. And there you go, you can hear my, my timer going off. That is the 3-minute timer, and what that is after I've sprayed the spray adhesive on, I have given it 3 minutes to let it tack up. And it's just a plain white piece of paper, which is very sticky now. And we're going to put this in place on the front side of our blank. And the only purpose for this piece of paper is to give us something to draw on, because walnut does not allow our pencil to show very well. So I've got this piece of paper now, and we can draw out the shape of our box. Well, this is the really nice thing about bandsaw boxes, is you're really not limited to any kind of a shape other than your imagination. And I don't have a clue here what I'm doing as far as the shape goes, but let's try something a little different here. Let's do like this. All right, sure. I'll go with that. I don't know what the point of that was, but sure, we'll do it. And then I want maybe some legs on this. They're not symmetrical. There's really nothing symmetrical about it. And now we need our drawers, and let's just see where we want to put our drawers. So let's just say we're going to put them here, and we're going to bring them down here, just like that. And then these will come up just like that. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but again, it's one of those things that we love about bandsaw boxes, and that is the freedom to create whatever it is that you want. So let's mimic the shape of this one here, like that. And this one I brought kind of to a point. So let's round this side like that. And then we'll bring it up around, and let's bring this side to a point. Yeah, like that. I can dig that. Now, I have no idea what this is all about. I don't know what kind of a shape it is. It's kind of a squished up weird thing, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up these lines to make them a little sharper, and then we're going to cut out our centerpieces, which will be for our drawers. Well, first and foremost, before you do any of the cutting of the bandsaw box, you need to ensure that your blade is square to the table. I've said this before, for the table saw, scroll saw, bandsaw, it makes no difference what tool you're using. Check, especially for something like this where pieces are all going to fit back together afterwards, check to make sure that your pieces are good to go, or sorry, that your blade is square to the table. Now for this, you're going to see a million tutorials online, and everyone does it differently. Some of them do the outside profile first, all that jazz. That's not me. I don't do that. So we're going to start off with cutting out the insides of these drawers. Now, because I have a pointed piece here, that's going to be our entry point. I like to make the entry points along with the grain, because that will get glued back together. And if you're in line with the grain, it can help you hide that glue joint on the sides here where we're going to put it back in. So bottom line is here, guys, take it slow, get your dust collection on, get those safety glasses on, hearing protection, etc., and carefully now cut out the blocks for your drawer pieces. Well, before we do any more cutting on the actual body of the box itself, we're going to glue these kerf marks back together. We're going to get as much glue in that crack as we can, even if we have to separate it a little bit with our hands carefully. Be careful not to split along the grain here, but we're going to get as much glue in here as we can. We're going to clamp it all together, as well as on this little bottom corner here. We're going to do the same thing, clamp that in tight like that. Once we get that done, we're also going to glue the back on. Now we can do a little bit of sanding here on the back. You can see we have a tiny bit of tear out. I'm not concerned about that. That's inside of the box, but we don't want it to interfere with our glue up. So you do want to give that a little bit of sanding. And I can also see some saw kerf marks on here, which means that if there's saw kerf marks on this part of the body, there will also be saw marks on the other part. So all I'm going to do is, with a piece of sandpaper attached to a 3/4 inch piece of MDF, I'm going to give this a sanding until those saw marks are gone on both pieces. And while we're gluing all this back together, we are going to glue the back on and clamp it in place and set it aside. Well, while we're waiting for that other stuff to dry up, we can work on the drawers. And our first thing that we want to do is we want to cut a slice off the front and the back, which will be the front and back of our drawers. And for that, I have set my fence at approximately 3/8 of an inch. Doesn't have to be exact. So what you want to do here on the bandsaw is make sure that your piece is completely supported. And once you get that supported, run it through and take off 3/8 of an inch slab off of either side. If you're having problems getting it supported, what you can always do is trace this profile and cut yourself a support block. If it's too rocky, or the design that you've made makes it so that this rocks on your bandsaw table, you should really get some support under that. So nothing wrong with creating a cradle just to run it through for these passes. Either way, let's get the front and the back cut off of this, off of these drawers. Now, just like we did with our the backing of our box, we're just going to use the sandpaper on the 3/4 MDF, and we're going to take off those saw marks. Now, it doesn't take much depending on what kind of a blade you used, but a few good passes there should have this nice and smooth. And the purpose for getting it smooth is so that we have a good surface to glue onto once we put the drawer back together. So the next thing that you want to do, now that you have these pieces sanded, is you want to mark out for your drawers and for the drawer cavity where you want to cut. So what we have is we have the core section of our drawer, and we have to know which side is up. So just compare it with your body of your bandsaw box and make sure that you're drawing the up part the right way. You wouldn't want to cut it on the bottom so every time you open the drawer everything falls out. But leave ample material here so that you can have something to glue to, and just sketch out what you think might work for the interior of the drawer. This is what I love about this project, is that you can do whatever you want. It's so forgiving. I mean, you don't have any real rules here. So now that we have our drawers marked out, we're going to take them over to the bandsaw and cut away our waste area of the drawer. Before you do, though, check them in the holes in the body of your bandsaw box to make sure that you do have the tops of them marked as the tops. And this would be the cavity now of our box. And before we glue it together, what I want to do is I want to take this over to the oscillating drum sander, and we're just going to clean up the inside of the box. And we've got some sharp edges here on what will be the entrance of the box. We're going to round those off as well. Don't touch any of this outer profile just yet. We're going to sand that a little later. Just the inside of the box and round off these sharp corners. And now you want to take the front and the back that you cut earlier, and we're going to carefully glue them back in place on our blank. Now, you want to be careful with the alignment. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect because we're going to sand, but you want to have it as close to perfect with the alignment as you can. So get everything lined up nice and glue it together, the front and the back onto the core of your drawers. Well, enough time has passed on our body glue up that we can now cut the outer profile of it. Our drawers are sitting over on the other side. We can wait for those, but for now, let's get this cut out, and that will be the body finished with the exception of sanding. Now with the profile or our drawing or whatever you want to call it of our box cut out, we're going to go over to that oscillating spindle sander and we're going to give it a good sanding on the outside, just cleaning up any cuts that don't look right or that sort of thing. So sand it up, guys. Well, we've given the entire box a complete sanding on the outside to remove any of the saw marks that may have been caused by cutting it at the bandsaw. And I think I'm going to give it a little more. There are still a few areas there that are a little questionable to me. Take your time. There's no rush. I mean, we don't need to pump these things out 10 every hour. We're not mass production. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper, a fairly coarse grit actually, probably about 150 or 180, and we're going to get in around the inside edges here of our drawer openings and take away that sharp edge, soften up those edges. We're going to soften up the outer edges of our bandsaw box. Now we could use a router bit, but I don't want that much of a profile on it. And if I did, it would be a very small profile. But for my liking, I think I want to do it by hand, and we're just going to take off that rough edge. Once we get that done, we need to head over to the oscillating sander again, and we're going to start sanding the boxes, or basically the drawers of the boxes. Well, although we try as best we can to do a careful glue up with these drawers of the bandsaw box, we still get a little bit of a ridge here. And of course, there's going to be saw marks. You can't avoid that with a bandsaw unless you're using a very fine-tooth blade. Now, you don't want to do too much sanding here because you don't want too sloppy of a fit in the holes of the box. So only sand what is necessary and needed to take out the saw marks and try to even up any of the little ridges that you may have caused when you glued it together. And with our drawers sanded now, we can just do a test fit as to how they sit in our bandsaw box. And you know, so far so good. Well, here's the problem now. How do we get access to the drawer? Now, there are a couple ways that you can go about this. Some of the styles are you could drill a through hole here about the size of your finger so that you can reach to the back and push the drawer out, leaving this a much cleaner profile on the front. Or you could add a little handle to these drawers. And I'm thinking that maybe I might like the handle route this time. And I think I would like it to be a contrasting wood to match our poplar center here. So let's go to the wood rack and grab some poplar. Well, I've got the bandsaw box clamped down to my bench, and I've got a sliding square. And what I've done is the same piece of wood that I made the center core of this out of, I've cut some 1/4 inch wide or 1/4 inch thick by 3/8 of an inch wide pieces. And I've just put a little 10-degree slice on either side just to bevel it. And in order to get the handles completely parallel with the base, all I'm going to do is use a sliding square, put some glue on them, put them in place on the drawer, line them up roughly center, at least the first one, and then I'm going to release my square. And that right there will roughly be the placement of the handle. And we're doing a dry fit, so once I'm happy with that, then I'll glue it in place. When I do the second one for my dry fit, all I'm going to do is make sure that the edge of this sliding square lines up with the edge of this handle, and then I will be able to make sure that the handles line up vertically on the edges so that nothing looks off, even though it's such a weird shaped box. So I'm going to go ahead now and glue these handles on. And with the handles in place, this box is pretty much done. I think the only thing that I'm going to do to it now will be to place a couple coats of Danish oil on this, and we'll go from there. But let's apply a couple coats of this Danish oil and just see how it brings out some of the grains. And there you have it. A bandsaw box. Guys, these are great projects to get more out of your bandsaw. If you've had your bandsaw sitting in a corner collecting dust because it was given to you or whatever, use it. Do something with it. And this is a great project to get you started. If anything, it'll help you to get in gear and tune up those bandsaws and get them ready for this project, because squareness of the blade to the table is extremely important. And if your bandsaw has been a little off for quite some time but you just haven't bothered to deal with it, now is the time, and this could be the project for you to work on it with. One of the great things about bandsaw boxes, guys, is that you just, the versatility, you are not limited. You saw how I just freehanded the design. It doesn't have to be any special shape. It doesn't have to look great. It doesn't even have to be, a leaf or something fancy or square edges. Draw it out. It doesn't matter what it looks like because you saw the results and you saw how great it looks. And that was just some silly, crazy, not a square edge on the darn thing, kind of a fly by the seat of your pants build, and they turn out great every time. The only thing you have to watch out for is your entry cuts coming into the box. Try to keep them as in line with the grain as you can. On the top drawer of this one, I came in on an angle instead of straight in with the grain because I didn't want to do a sharp turn, and that joint shows on my box. And if I would have come straight in, you would have never seen it because the one on the bottom drawer you cannot see because I was able to come in line running parallel with the grain. Something to keep in mind when you're sketching out your little box and how you're going to bring your blade in to cut that drawer out. Another thing I would have done differently with this one is when I was slicing off the front and back of the drawers, that I think I did a 1/4 inch or 3/8 or whatever I did. Again, see, the measurements don't matter because it's all up to you, whatever you want to do. But either way, cutting off the drawers, the front and the back slice. If I had it back, I would have used my resaw blade for that. I think it would have given a much cleaner cut, and there was way too many saw marks there to sand out for my liking. And because of that, it actually made my drawers recess into the box just a little bit, about a 1/16 of an inch. Now I was considering shimming those out to make them flush, but I kind of dig it. I kind of like that inset look of those drawers, so I'm not going to bother changing it or shimming it out. What you see is what you get, and that's what I made, and that's the way I like it, and that's the way it's going to stay. So this is what I mean, versatility. The other thing I wouldn't have done is I probably wouldn't have spilled half a can of Danish oil all over my bench had I not had so much clutter there and got distracted and that sort of thing. That's all right, it happens. I cleaned it up, we're good to go. The inside of the drawers. Now it's up to you what you want to do. For these, I will eventually flock them and give them a nice colorful inside that's soft, the way that suede text or flocking does. And we don't need a video of it here. There is a video of flocking on my channel. If you're interested in that sort of thing, just do a little search on it and you will find it. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me this week. I hope you're going to try one of these bandsaw boxes yourself and take the opportunity to get your bandsaw back into motion in your shop and get it tuned up and to move ahead with some projects like this that are fun on the bandsaw. It's not all about square corners and 90 degrees, but give it a try. It's a heck of a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I hope you're going to join me again next week for yet another woodworking video.